Turn to our main story. The government set out a new definition of extremism. It's part of a pledge to tackle what it calls an increased threat to the UK.
Critics say the measures threaten freedom of speech, worship and peaceful protest.
Let's talk to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Michael Gove joins us now. Good morning, Michael Gove. Thank you for your time with us here on BBC Breakfast. Why is a new official definition of extremism needed today?
Well, we have an existing definition of extremism, but we think it's necessary to update it and to be more precise. And of course, this comes against a backdrop of an increase in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred on our streets and on social media. And we believe that this new definition will help government in choosing our friends wisely when it comes to making sure that we can promote a greater sense of inclusivity and social cohesion, because this definition will apply to particular groups who are extremist, and it will make it clear that the government won't be funding or engaging with those groups, because it's vitally important that we support those people and those individuals and organisations who are seeking to promote that greater degree of social cohesion.
Do the current rules mean that you're not able to choose those groups that you work with wisely now?
Well, the current definition is, I don't think, sufficiently precise. And it has also been the case, unfortunately, that there have been some individuals and some organisations who are extremist, who have exploited the opportunity to work with government in order to mask their true actions and their true agenda. There was an example of a gentleman called Shakil Beg, who was able to work with the NHS, with local government, with education, and to present himself as a moderate figure, but it was only after a court examined his record that his extremism and his extremist activities were revealed. It's important that we have a precise and rigorous definition, because we need to ensure that when government is funding groups that promote social cohesion, that we're clear that they are the sorts of groups that do have the very best interests of community work at their heart.
So what will you be doing more of to make sure that the likes of Shakil Beg, who is the subject of a BBC report, won't be able to mask these actions? How do these new rules change that?
Well, it enables us to identify organisations with a greater degree of precision, and it's also the case that
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't understand. You would investigate anyone anyway, wouldn't you? You would look into the background of anyone, surely. So how do these new rules mean that you can investigate better?
Well, we are also building up a centre of excellence in my department, which will complement the work that's done by the Home Office and others, to assess organisations against this criteria. And we know that in the past there have been other individuals and organisations that have received government funding that should not have done. And so by making sure that we're clearer and more precise about the terms on which we fund and engage with organisations, and also by making sure that the due diligence is undertaken in a rigorous way by trained civil servants with the help of outside academics and others, we can ensure that we are more effective in directing government money to the absolutely vital work of bringing communities together at a time of increased polarisation.
How many groups do you think have been able to mask their actions, or individuals amongst these groups have been able to mask their actions, so that the government would now change its relationship or funding for them?
Well, again, the whole point about setting up a centre of excellence and undertaking due diligence is to make sure that that process is rigorous. So it's important for me, as the person who, along with the Home Secretary, will be making these decisions, not to preempt that process. It's important for me, of course, to talk to colleagues and to identify organisations that we think are of concern, and then to undertake that work.
But surely it's come up. Surely it's got to a point where you've said, you know, we've got too many groups. These groups, there's too much of this happening. We're seeing this, so we need to implement these new rules. Surely that's happened, so you've got a number in your head.
No, I think it's entirely understandable why you would want to ask what the number is. But the critical thing is that if I, as a decision maker, am saying that a particular organisation, in due course, after evidence has been presented to me and to others, is extremist, that I don't preempt that process. So, again, one of the key things here is that we know that some extremist organisations are litigious. And as you quite rightly mentioned, Mr. Shakil Beg chose to sue the BBC after it drew attention to his activities. So if I were to say now that there were a set number of organisations that were of concern, then I would be preempting what has to be a thoughtful and rigorous process. One thing I should say is that some people have suggested, and I think it was mentioned in your introduction, that this process will somehow inhibit free speech. Let me be clear, it won't. Organisations and individuals will still be free to argue positions which you or I might find difficult or offensive. We cherish free speech in this country, but when it comes to government funding and government engagement, then government, I think, has to be careful about who it provides funds for or who it provides access for.
So they can have free speech?
Yes.
But if you don't like it, you won't fund them anymore?
Yes.
The Archbishops of York and Westminster have voiced concerns that this new definition, and I quote, risks vilifying the wrong people and creating more division. How many religious leaders did you consult during this?
Consulted widely, actually. We consulted people from within the Muslim, Jewish and Christian communities. But, of course, one of the points about this definition is that it works on an existing definition. It makes it more precise. And, in particular, it builds on the work of Mark Rowley, before he became Commissioner of the Met, and Dame Sarah Khan, who's an independent government advisor.
It's interesting that this is to reflect British values, I think is one of the phrases that has been used regarding these new rules, to ensure that British values are upheld. May I ask you, regarding the comments Frank Hester allegedly made about Diane Abbott, there's a lot of conversations today about whether or not, one, let's firstly begin with the Conservative Party's donation by him, £10 million, whether that should be given back. Has it been spent?
Well, the first thing is on the point about fundamental British values. That is in the old definition. The new definition is more precise because we want...
Thank you for clarifying that. Has the £10 million
I think it's important because there is often
you.
confusion in the debate about what it is that we're doing. There are some people who weren't aware there was an already existing definition,
and thank you for
some people who are
that.
confusing
I'll go
the
back to the
existing
question.
definition with the new definition.
Has the £10 million...
As to how the money that Mr Hester or any other donor has given to the Conservative Party been spent, I'm afraid I don't know.
Why don't you know?
Because
there's a row about it. You're a cabinet minister. There's a row about giving the money back. Why don't you know if you're in a position to give the money back if you choose?
I'm not the Conservative Party chairman. I'm not responsible for how the Conservative Party deploys its funds. But I think it's clear Mr Hester's comments were racist. He's apologised for them and shown contrition. I think it is appropriate that he apologised because what he said was terrible.
He accepts he was rude. He didn't apologise for the actual comments.
I believe that he has, and my inclination is always that when someone has said something, in this case, grossly offensive, if they do show appropriate contrition, then forgiveness is appropriate. But obviously, you know, when you've got someone saying terrible things like this, it's important that it's called out. I think it's also important to contextualise the broader situation we face in this country and to acknowledge that while racism still exists, we're also in a position where we have a British Asian Prime Minister and one of the most diverse cabinets in the Western world, and the Conservative Party, like the Labour Party,
that doesn't make
represents Britain in all its diversity.
That doesn't make the Conservative Party exempt from saying it doesn't call out racism. It took more than 24 hours to call this out, to call it racist, and the Conservative Party has still accepted £10 million from someone who made grossly offensive and racist comments. Does that sit well with you?
Yes, he did make racist comments, and we did call it out, and the Prime Minister was very clear about that, and he has, the gentleman concerned, apologised. But as I say, I'm proud of the fact that the Conservative Party has the first British Asian Prime Minister, had the first female Prime Minister, and that we also have represented around the Cabinet table and in every rank of government and throughout our party people who represent Britain in all its diversity. I think that's a good thing, and it follows on from the consistent championing of greater diversity in politics that David Cameron led, and which has continued during our time in government.
Please tell me, when Frank Hester allegedly said that, and I want to get this quote right, "I don't hate all black women at all, but I think she should be shot." Is that an extremist view?
Well, speaking as someone who was pursued by an individual who was trying to kill me and who subsequently succeeded in killing one of my friends in Parliament, I take that sort of language very seriously, and I think it's unacceptable.
I'm sorry, that's not quite what I asked. Is that an extremist view, and would it fall under these new rules, these new definitions of extremism? I can repeat the quote for you if you wish again.
Well, I take these things exceptionally seriously, and because I take them seriously, it would be the case that any assessment about whether or not an individual or an organisation is extremist would have to follow a rigorous process. It wouldn't be me making a decision on the basis of a quote, however horrific. It would be a due diligence process that would be conducted very carefully.
And it would be down to the government of the time which you are part of, yes?
Sorry?
It would be down to the government of the time which you are now part of.
It would be down to an appropriate process that would follow independent advice, civil servants who are politically impartial, looking at the evidence, and that evidence being supplemented by academics. But as I say, I take the use or the issuing of these threats very seriously, having, as I say, for the reasons with which you're familiar, knowing all too well the dangers that some people in public life have had to face.
Michael Gove, Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, thank you very much for your time with us here on BBC Breakfast.
Not at all. Thank you, Naga.